All right, folks, this is Scott with the Game Audio Institute, and we are continuing our lovely journey into audio scripting. And let's just sort of recap kind of where we were. We were basically dealing with how to play sounds from an array, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to just look at different ways that we can play from the array, from the list, and we're going to cover a little bit about how to do things maybe randomly, and also, how to also repeat if we wanted to repeat the list and stuff like that. So let's just get right into it. All right. So where we last left off was we were looking at our individual list of stuff, essentially. And what we were doing is basically examining how to play from the list. And what we basically said was, we're going to have this sort of situation where it's going to play from the list. And we basically kind of created a simple check to make sure that if we got to the end of the items in the list, and we knew that there were 7 items in the list, so we say if count is equal to 7 right there, then we reset the count back to 0, so that basically just flips the whole thing back over. Now, here's the thing, right? What if you wanted to just be able to make it so that no matter how long the list was, you would just automatically be able to know that you got to the end of the list, essentially, right? Because this is very, very static right now, the way that it currently is. If you have 8 items in the list, for example, it's going to basically go early. If you have 6 items in the list, then it'll be late, basically. It will never hit 7 effectively. So here's something that you can do in order to be able to, make something like that essentially happen inside. So what you want to do in that particular case, there's a particular characteristic of every kind of array. There's a parameter, if you will, basically, of all the arrays, which is called length. Okay, and it basically gives the number of items in the array. Okay, so what you can say, instead of count is equal to 7, what you can do is you can say if count is less than the length of the amount. Remember how the count 0 is already our first item, so our count is going to be whatever the list name was called, sound list, right? So we're going to call it sound list, and then what we're going to say is sound list, and then dot length. So what that means is that if the count is less than the count list, sound list dot length, then we basically revert it back to here. Now that, of course, will make this automatically true, right? So this is probably isn't the best thing to say. So what we want to say is maybe if count is probably equal to. In this case, whenever you're doing an equal sign, you want to do the double equal sign. So you want to say if count equals sound list dot length, count is equal 0, and then playlist, trigger source play one shot. And then we're doing all of the stuff we were doing basically before. All right, so now, so that's a pretty easy one to do, and I don't probably even need to check it to make sure that it will work. But the idea is that if we change the length, it'll keep track of that length, and it will always know how long the list is. So that will be a dynamic bit of code, which is always a very good thing. It's always a good thing to be as dynamic as possible so that you can constantly adjust, right, to any of the potential changes that basically are going to happen. So, all right, so now let's do another thing. So the next thing that I'm going to talk about is how do you, So how do you basically end up randomizing? Because another thing that's very, very common inside playing from lists is not just playing in order, but also playing randomly, right? So in this case, how would you randomly pick some, sound from the list and then play that sound? Well, in that particular case, you're going to use a random function, and there is, in fact, one here inside C#. So what you're going to do in this case is you're going to use something called random.range, okay? So in that case, what you're going to do is you want to basically edit your sound list, and instead of the count, you want to actually stick random.range. Now, let me just show you a little teeny bit about how random.range is sort of supposed to work. Okay, so in other words, what you could do is you could call, here's what I could do. I can say, I can actually declare a value here. I could do this also just directly in the square brackets if I wanted to, but this is just as good. So I can say int random number, and then I'm going to say equals random dot range, and random dot range is going to need two numbers. It's going to need the lower bounds of the random range and the higher bounds of the random range. So in this case, random dot range, and you're going to say what the amount is. So you're going to always give the 0 because that's the first item in the list. And then again, we can use this sound list dot length, same as before. So we can go sound list and dot length. And you can't see that right there, but there it is right there. Okay. So random number equals random range 0 sound list dot length. Okay. So in this particular case, then we can take trigger source dot play one shot sound list, and instead of count, right, which is count would just be increasing the number all the time, right? We're not going to use count. So we're not going to care about count. All we're going to care about is that we make sure that it's going to be bound within 0 and the length of the list. So in this case, we then don't even need this whole checking and this whole checking because all of our stuff's going to be random. We're not actually going to be increasing numbers or going through the list in a sequential manner. We're going through the list in a sort of random manner. Now, so we go 0 and then sound list dot length. Okay. And for this case, then we're going to take out count, and we're just going to say, in this case, we can just call this random number. We can use the same value here, and we can just basically go like that. So, oops, I think I typed ranf. That's right. Okay, there you go, random number. So that's the idea. Int random num equals random.range 0 sound list dot length trigger source play one shot sound list random number. Now, mind you, this kind of randomness is not really super random. And also, the other thing to understand is that random does not mean no repeats, okay? So random numbers will repeat. So the best way to kind of get it to repeat less with this particular thing, I mean, you could obviously do some, we'll show you later about kind of how to maybe do something where you can kind of get like more of a shuffle situation, but that's a little bit more complex to get into. May not quite do it this week. But the idea is we're going to do this play one shot and, and then randomly pick, something from the list. And that means that potentially we could get repeats. The longer the list is, the less chance there will be of a repeat. So we have, 7 items in our list at the current moment? Yep. So hopefully it won't be too bad. So let's give this a try inside Unity, and we shall see what happens. Make sure we don't have any errors, of course, in our script. And we'll see what happens. What does console say? Console is blank. We are good to go. All right, so let's give it a try. And we're going to click into the area. And this way what happens is we never really run out of, hopefully, we never really run out of space or, numbers that are outside of the range, basically. There's that. There's another one. Yep. But you can hear. Yep. So it works pretty well as long as you have a relatively large number of random objects. But when you in your list, I mean, if you have a smaller number of objects, you're definitely going to get repeats. So if you have 3 or 4 objects or something in your random list, you're going to get repeats. It's going to be almost pretty obvious at that point. This one was, not too bad overall. So this is a quick one for this week. So I hope this is helpful because you can use this kind of random stuff for anything, really. You can use it for random volume amounts or random pitch values or things like that. You could do all kinds of stuff. In fact, let's just do that. Let's just figure that out. We can actually do that inside our script really easily. We can do that really easily. So we can just actually create another thing. In this case, we're going to try to create, it's a float number, so we're going to call this float. And let's see what we can do here. I'm going to try to figure out our random range. So I'm going to call this random pitch. Okay, random pitch. And that is going to equal random range. Now that's going to be just some variable that we're going to do. And remember, whenever you're doing floats, you have to put the F in there. Although sometimes you can, if you get 0, you can just type 0 and that's okay if you have the number 0. That can usually work. But any other number usually, especially if it's a decimal number, usually you have to put F after it. Otherwise, it will be considered a double, which is a whole nother thing than a float. Anyway, so here we go, and we're going to say it's random.range. Let me think about what a good range is going to be. Let's do 0.5f to 2.0f, which is basically 1 octave up and down. Okay, so that's going to be significantly perceptible. So in this particular case, now here's the thing: we're calling this random pitch, but we actually have not set this up on the audio source. So we can actually do that. This is an audio source control called pitch. If you want to find out more about what the audio controls are on the audio source, you can go and check earlier videos that we have on the channel about that sort of stuff. Anyway, but here we go. We're going to go and say it is where's our trigger source. So it's going to be trigger source dot pitch equals random pitch. So we're setting the pitch of that audio source before we play it, because we have to do it before we play it, to that random pitch, and then we're going to play randomly from the list. So now we're actually creating a random pitch as well as randomly playing from a list. That gives us a lot more variety and even more organic sound effects. So let's go and save that, check it inside Unity, and we'll see what happens. Okay, and yeah, anyway, so as you can see, we got lots more variety in that particular one. All right, so that's it for this week. I hope you've learned something helpful, and we will be back in future weeks with even more stuff. So make sure that you are subscribed, press the bell button. You can also leave a comment, and we'll get back to you as well. Like, share, comment, do all kinds of fun stuff. And we will see you in the next week, and I hope this helps you get your game audio on. See you next time.